It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with The Daily Beast. Joining us from London, Nick O'Hines, world editor of The Daily Beast. How are things by the banks of the River Thames?
Beautiful, beautiful over here. Good evening.
Good evening as well to Vivian Walt, Paris correspondent for Time magazine. How are you?
Very good.
Very good. Okay, let's see if Marie Gégaud, staff reporter at the international desk of French daily newspaper Le Monde, is very good.
Very good.
All right, thanks for being with us. Thanks as well to Lila Jacinto, who is a senior editor at France24.com. How are things?
Not bad, it's Friday.
Not bad, it's Friday. You can listen, like, and subscribe to The World This Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other fine streaming services. It's back to the brutal reality of war. A week ago at this time, some were still holding out hope that a week-long truce between Israel and Hamas could somehow be revived after it had fallen apart. Now it's house-to-house combat in the streets of Gaza's central city of Khan Younis, and a fresh draft resolution at the UN Security Council in New York calling for a humanitarian ceasefire. Strong words by the UN Secretary General, Lila Jacinto, saying Hamas's brutality can never justify, quote, the collective punishment of Palestinians. Antonio Guterres, who the Israelis have made a lightning rod since this conflict began.
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, Antonio Guterres has invoked a very rare article. It's Article 99 of the UN Convention. This is a rare move. And you are dead right. Guterres very early in this conflict became a lightning rod for Israel when I think when he said that there is a context to October 7th. You know, there are... I mean, this is such a divisive issue. And by now, 2 months into this war, you see exactly where all these lightning points are. You know, who's trying to talk about what, the context, who does not want to just take this conversation from October 7th, who is not condemning Hamas enough. So these are the things that it's all coming down to. I mean, Israel has had a very, very difficult relationship with the UN. And this week, Israel revoked the residency visa of the UN's humanitarian coordinator. She is a Canadian. But Francois, I remember, this was in 2005 at an APAC summit when in Washington, D.C., when they had all, these kids from different universities come in for the summit. I was interviewing them. At the start of the summit, they all said they don't really know much about the Middle East. It's very complicated, university kids. And then they had these sessions for them, which was closed to the media. I slipped into one of them. And they were basically telling the kids that the UN is against Israel, and it had, a very easy early distortion of how the UN is against Israel. I have to say it's the end of the year, but it really feels like I'm watching the end of the world order as it was, and it somehow seems destined that the UN institutions are being questioned.
Yeah, and that brings us back to what you said at the outset. This evocation, I think it was the last time, was when there was the civil war between Pakistan and what is now Bangladesh. First time since then, evoking this Article 99 by the UN Secretary General.
There is clearly, in my view, a serious risk of aggravating existing threats to the maintenance of international peace and security. The risk of collapse of the humanitarian system is fundamentally linked with the complete lack of safety and security for our staff in Gaza, and with the nature and intensity of military operations which are severely limiting access to people in desperate need.
Marie Gégaud, how is Antonio Guterres doing in this?
Excuse me?
How's he doing?
Well, he's trying to... But we see clearly that the Security Council is totally paralyzed, and it's not the first time that we see this, but it was probably the United States and Great Britain, they are going to veto so there is few chance that there will be a ceasefire in Gaza. And we have seen in the past how the Security Council was completely blocked by Russia, by Russia's veto in Syria, for the war in Syria. So, of course, maybe like Leila said, we are seeing the paralysis and the end of the Security Council, which should be reformed. We know this, and there are a lot of talks about it, but no hope.
The reform of the Security Council, in this case, it would be the U.S. and Britain that would be outnumbered, Vivian Walt.
Well, and France. Yes, I mean, Marie brings up a very good point, which is you have these 5 veto power nations, which no longer represent any kind of consensus. This isn't the first war that this has kind of been exposed. It's also the Ukraine war. That there is, I think what's so scary is that there is no longer, it seems, an infrastructure globally in which to maneuver one's way out of a really hot war. That just does not seem to be functioning at all. It's kind of like a runaway train. And I think that's what's so dangerous about the situation. The Secretary General talks about we're at risk of the humanitarian situation of collapsing. I mean, I would say from everything that you read and people you hear speak, it has collapsed. It is really not functioning. There is no real humanitarian structure anymore.
All right, so it's not the UN Security Council that's going to, where the watershed moment is going to happen. The Israeli government has talked of a months-long campaign in Gaza, and even though the U.S. seems set to veto the latest resolution calling for a humanitarian ceasefire, it has changed the way it speaks. There was a Thursday telephone call between Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. Biden talking up the concept of humanitarian corridors and protecting civilians. U.S., Israel's main ally, making noises publicly.
As we stand here almost a week into this campaign in the South after the end of the humanitarian pause, it is imperative, it remains imperative that Israel put a premium on civilian protection. And there does remain a gap between exactly what I said when I was there, the intent to protect civilians, and the actual results that we're seeing on the ground.
Nicole Hines, is that as far as the Biden administration can go at this point?
Well, I think they're ratcheting the pressure up bit by bit and will very slowly, it has to be said, that the pressure is increasing. They're obviously keeping Biden's powder dry because he has basically said almost nothing other than putting his full support behind Israel and Bibi Netanyahu, even though there are huge political differences between them. Biden is somebody who has been really kind of involved and deeply moved by the kind of cause of Israel since the beginning of his political career. He's very much a kind of previous generation of politician in that way. And all he has said so far is that he will give his support. Meanwhile, his staff,
he did tell the Israelis, he did tell the Israelis, heed the calls of the mistakes the U.S. made after 9/11.
Yeah, which is a very good point, a very strong point. But it's a bit different to kind of saying, hold on a minute, what you're doing is out of order, which is, what we just heard on that clip. And it's fascinating that Biden's administration is saying something completely different to him. And it seems to me that what they're doing is they're waiting for a moment when Biden himself comes out and says, okay, you've now reached a line and this is no longer acceptable. It's fascinating to see what will happen at the Security Council. The Security Council is always a bit of a kind of puppet show, I don't know whether Britain and America will vote in the same way, but they will certainly collude between each other to make sure that ultimately the ceasefire does not pass. And it's very hard to see how their position in this is kind of can cause an agreement. You know, the pause that we had last week was negotiated seemingly just by Egypt and Qatar rather than the United States. So there does seem to be a shift in whose responsibility and who can be trusted to negotiate these things.
And yet the U.S. Bearing the brunt of we've seen there were fresh missile attacks overnight in Baghdad on the Green Zone at the U.S. targeting the U.S. Embassy. We saw the week beginning with the United States scrambling a naval task force after weekend attacks in the Red Sea. Iran-aligned Houthi rebels have been targeting commercial vessels carrying Israeli goods or suspected Israeli goods. It even captured a ship, the Bahamas flag Galaxy Leader. And while the 25 crew members remain prisoners, it's offering tours of the boat to the public.
We will seize all Israeli ships in and around the Red Sea. This is in defense of our brothers in Gaza and children being killed at hospitals and women in their homes.
So the conflict, and the Houthis have said, this is linked to what's going on in Gaza.
Absolutely, as is, you know, what we're seeing in Iraq, although, of course, there were, you know, attacks in Iraq before, but this clearly has the potential to spread quickly and quite widely. I think what's so baffling to me is the actual strategy. What is Israel's strategy at this point? Because it does not seem to make much sense. There does not seem to be a way to militarily obliterate Hamas. And so short of that, what are you doing? And what is happening afterwards? There doesn't seem to be a real plan for what comes after the war. And by the way, we almost forget the fact that there are more than 100 hostages in captivity. If we had thought that, like, more than, you know, a little more than 2 months ago, that there would be 100 Israeli hostages in captivity and it would basically be a kind of footnote in this war, it would have been unimaginable.
I mean, the interesting thing is not just what is the political plan, but what is the military plan, which is the extremely short-term plan. You know, they're on the ground in the north. They are around in the south. They have a huge network of tunnels. The Wall Street Journal has reported that there is a plan to flood the tunnels with water. You know, that would lead to an atrocity that would be just unfolding before our eyes. Militarily, you know, Israel will be conducting a subterranean war, sort of like a video game, because they do not quite understand the extent of these tunnels. You know, Hamas fighters will be able to exit as they will. You know, this flooding, if it takes place.
How about killing a few senior commanders? Because that has been something that they've talked about a lot.
I mean, you know, they keep talking about, you know, killing Yahya Sinwar. So they surround his house, and his family gets punished, collective punishment against international law. He's a political guy. So, I mean, you know, if Hamas loses a top commander or two, yes, it is a loss of some human resources. But this is an organization that is inbuilt into its very makeup, you know, that it will survive. And frankly, even if Hamas is down to its last fighters, even if it fires one little rocket, it will proclaim it's for the resistance. And after this level of a crackdown, you know, nobody even knows how ordinary Palestinians will react to Hamas, because we love to talk about, you know, the failure of Palestinian leadership. You know, it's the West's favorite sticking point. But we never talk about how we never enabled a Palestinian leadership. So, you know, Hamas is not going to, you know, it's militarily going to be difficult. Forget about politically, which is
difficult. And there are all these confusing pieces in this puzzle. The Iran-aligned Houthis have been fighting a Saudi Arabia-led coalition, and yet a day before Iran's president traveled to Moscow, Vladimir Putin was in Riyadh. He was welcomed by the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And I mean, all right, Marie-Gigot, I know that they're both OPEC plus members. And by the way, the price of oil is down. Since the pair met. What do you make of Vladimir Putin's little tour? He also went to the UAE.
Right, because they are the two. The UAE, for example, is a main partner for Russia, because mostly it's a hub for commercial dealing. Banks, a lot of oligarchs went there and live there now. But it's interesting, of course. But I think there is an aspect that we haven't seen, which is because, of course, they are not going to tell us. I mean, Putin nor Mohammed Ben Salman are not going to tell us that, in fact, there is a problem in OPEC Plus, because they want the price oils to get higher, but it doesn't happen. And then Russia was committed to reduce its production, but we see that we are not sure that Russia is doing this. In fact, it was mentioned by a ministry, Saudian Ministry of Energy, in June, that Russia, of course, is not transparent about the oil it's exporting. But there is also another aspect that Elvira Nabiullina, the Russian central bank governor, was in the delegation, which means that for what you take with you the Russian governor of the central bank, it's strange, probably because I guess Russia has a lot of financial problems, because of course Russia sells a lot of oil since the war in Ukraine, and
but at a discounted price in many cases.
Yeah.
Yeah. War in a region that's the cradle of the planet's three great monotheist religions always turns into a political third rail for everybody else. Since October 7th, anti-Semitic acts here in France have surged. So, rabbis invited to the presidential palace to light the menorah for the first night of Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of lights, seems pretty straightforward. Except wait, the presidential palace is holy ground for the secular republic. The far left objects, saying if you're lighting menorahs, why not a nativity scene or an iftar, breaking of the fast during Ramadan at the Élysée? Emmanuel Macron says he stands by what he did. Was it clumsy? Should he not have done it?
I say have them all. Have an iftar and, Christmas trees and lights, and we could really use it.
Marie Gégaud, how big a problem is it to have the lighting of a menorah in the temple of secularism that's supposed to be the presidential palace?
It's a little bit too much a temple of secularism, maybe, and we French, we are maybe we pay too much attention to such details. It should not be
Except
like
that the head of CRIF, this is the main Jewish institution in France, Jonathan Arfi, he actually said that it was an error for Macron to do that, and he said, his quote, "What anything that weakens secularism weakens the Jews of France." So this is also a statement on how this conflict is playing in Europe. Mm-hmm. Not only with the Houthis, we are seeing a security situation, and as someone who has covered Al-Qaeda and Daesh, etc., I mean, I can't tell you the number of war zones that I've been where I try to keep people on track and they start talking about the Israeli-Palestinian issue. There's that security issue, there's a domestic issue in Europe. This is a really far-reaching conflict.
All right. Also, by the way, lighting Hanukkah candles, Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, himself a Jew, non-observant, but lighting prayer candles seems somehow appropriate in view of the stalemate at the front as the war heads into another winter, and the tenuous financial lifeline he's got from allies, And on that point, Emmanuel Macron did more, by the way, on Thursday than welcome rabbis to the Élysée Palace. He wined and dined his Hungarian counterpart, a holdout for the €50 billion aid package for Ukraine that's on the table at next week's last EU summit of 2023. Is it the right strategy, Nico Heinz, to have the transactional populist Prime Minister of Hungary over for dinner, and for Emmanuel Macron to do that ahead of that summit?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's exactly what we need to do, because otherwise we're in the risk of a really, really serious problem here. If by kind of almost by accident the aid supplies dry up for Ukraine, then, you know, Russia, let's be clear, Russia will win this war. And it won't take very long for the supplies to run out if the funds are cut off. So I think Macron's doing exactly the right thing. I think every form of diplomacy should be deployed to try and get this thing over the line. If you look at what's going on in the United States, it's just a complete joke. Like, it's a narrow political argument. Most of the Republicans who are voting against this don't even care about what happens in Europe. It's so far away from their narrow political interests. But the war is at risk of becoming a kind of sacrificial lamb as some crazed right-wing Republicans try and make sure that they can firm up the base ahead of the Donald Trump election. And, of course, the possibility of Donald
You're
Trump
calling it the
returning to
Donald
White
Trump
House
election.
Yeah, well, let's face it, that's who we're going to be talking about. That's who we're going to be listening to. Joe Biden, bless him, he struggles to get his voice heard above the parapet when it comes to the attention of Donald Trump. We haven't seen him yet going head-to-head with Biden, and that's something that's going to come to the fore. And if you listen to what's happening in Moscow at the moment, we have people who watch the propaganda channels in Moscow and report back for us. They are cock-a-hoop with what the Republicans have done in Washington this week, and they are convinced that Trump's going to come back, save the day, and ensure that Putin is victorious in Ukraine.
All right, 50 billion euros in limbo over in Brussels, $50 billion on hold in the U.S. after Senate Republicans insisted on tying aid to a tightening of domestic border controls.
We want that to pass. But while we're talking about borders, my advice to the majority leader last week was, if you don't believe how serious we are about this, then file cloture.
Is the horse trading that Viktor Orban delves into the same as the horse trading on Capitol Hill?
Not exactly, in the sense that Viktor Orban is pretty near the war front. So it really is his kind of, sphere of influence, shall we say. And he is always aligned quite closely with Moscow. So he represents the flank of the 27 EU nations that is perhaps closest of all to Moscow. Of course, in Washington, it's like they're too busy, indicting Hunter Biden to talk about the Ukraine war. It's really astonishing.
Marie-Jago.
Yeah, I don't think it was a good idea to invite Orban for dinner or for lunch because with this kind of guy, there is no. It was the same thing when Macron invited Putin in Versailles and in his summer residence.
Macron's argument was you have to go through the motions, otherwise you'll be criticized if you don't.
I think with such kind of people, you don't do this. You just go brutal. It's the only language they can understand. So there is no need in inviting. And I mean, this Orban, it is a shame because if you think of what Hungary went through in '56 when people were killed.
Soviet tanks rolled into Budapest.
Yeah, and now he's playing the Putin card, and I mean, this is a shame.
Rio Jacinto.
Look, I mean, in the U.S., there's always been this sort of isolationist stream in the U.S., and there's always been Americans who are not very involved in foreign policy. But then there are the Beltway crowd and the people who are engaged in foreign policy issues. And there's no doubt that, Ukraine has turned out of sight, out of mind, because Gaza is taking over all the attention. And also, when it comes to... I don't know, when it comes to Ukraine, it's not just Hungary. I mean, even Poland is there are the Polish truckers and the Polish farmers who are unhappy about the prices. So we're really starting to see the strains in that coalition, and I can't help seeing this pattern over here of the U.S. comes out strongly for Ukraine. a year ago, and now things are falling apart. And in the Middle East, the U.S. is, it's down to Qatar and Egypt. So, the U.S. credibility on the international stage is really taking a hit.
It's never been stronger economically. We've seen the latest jobs reports this Friday out of the United States, unemployment below 4%. And yet we've seen this battle on Capitol Hill. Even though he's clinging to a 3-seat majority, it's the pro-Trump Speaker of the House of Representatives that's been looming large in this showdown. Mike Johnson, seen here Tuesday, welcoming the new UK Foreign Secretary. Nico Hines, that UK Foreign Secretary looks a lot like David Cameron.
He's back. It's very strange to see him wandering around. He's kind of been tempted back from the wilderness, from his back garden where he was sitting in a kind of little caravan writing books. Suddenly he's been thrust back into the limelight. And I think the truth is he was just bored before, so he's now got something to do. And perhaps, there is some utility to having somebody with a famous face. I don't know that Mike Johnson cares, but you can imagine that you have a little bit more heft when you're walking through the corridors of power on Capitol Hill, and people might be a little bit more willing to listen to you. But I wouldn't hold your breath that Cameron's going to save the day and bring us world peace.
All right, by the way, world peace, speaking of it, we can bemoan endless wars, but sometimes old rivals can get along. There's no problem Turkey and Greece can't solve together. Recep Tayyip Erdogan's words in Athens on Thursday, his first trip there since 2017. That one will long be remembered. And this comes just 3 years after the two nations nearly went to war again. But now they're getting along better all of a sudden, Marie Gégaud. It started with Greece helping Turkey when there was the earthquake, at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
What our correspondent in Ankara was saying was part of helping to facilitate all of this is that the United States is sending those F-16 fighter jets that Turkey has wanted for so long.
Yeah, and we see now that still Turkey hasn't got them, so there is a problem here. But it's interesting because Erdogan was saying 3 months ago that he wanted to delete the name of Mitsotakis. He said, I will delete your name. You are nothing to me now. And 3 months after, he's shaking hands.
So who's more transactional, Viktor Orban or Recep Tayyip Erdogan?
Yeah, same kind.
Or alternatively, Erdogan is very depth at diplomacy. He gets away with a lot of things. He can suddenly surprise you.
Yeah. But the results are terrible. You see, because Turkey is very isolated, and so he has a bad relationship with everybody. I mean, with you see, he's trying to go now for.
But he is cutting deals with both sides when it comes to the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. Yes,
I actually don't think so. And also after his election, his completely berserk economic policy, he's toned down on that. He's making outreaches to the West. He is the one who is most strident in what he says about Israel. That eternal battle that he has to be the leader of the Muslim world. I think Erdogan is coming out of this year doing pretty well for himself.
It depends. It's a show also. He's showing, but the results are really no good because, as you said, the economical situation is very bad, and then no progress in view with the EU. So he's not still, although he promised to do so, but still Sweden is not going to...
Is not entering NATO for the time being. The attack was random, not the choice of location. A radicalized 26-year-old with a history of mental illness stabbing to death a German-Filipino tourist. It happened near the Eiffel Tower Saturday evening. That's 7 months out from Paris hosting the Olympics, where organizers opted for an opening ceremony not in the usual setting inside of a stadium. Instead, it's going to showcase the French capital's most iconic landmarks. The government standing by that decision.
We have no plan B. We have a plan in which there are several sub-plans with a certain number of adjustment variables. That's the case for artistic events, which will only be finalized in the spring. And we have the capability to reduce certain aspects of the artistic program.
Vivian Walt, are you looking forward to the opening ceremony of the Summer Olympics?
You bet. I mean, it's going to be
Is it going to be a problem, or does the last Saturday's attack
I think
cast a shadow?
last Saturday's attack, in the grand scheme of things, was a very small attack. It has everybody obviously very worried because, firstly, the victim was a tourist, and we're going to have millions of tourists in the city. Secondly, you know, if you remember, when Paris bid for the Olympics, it was very shortly after the Paris attacks in 2015. And it was their way of saying, you know, we're back, this is us bouncing back, and we're going to be the splashiest, most spectacular
I asked the question because
Olympics.
the last major event that was hosted here was the final of the Champions League, where French riot police were used heavy-handed methods, and fans were roughed up, and some didn't even get to go into the stadium.
I mean, I have almost no doubt that there will be some security incident, hopefully minor, during the weeks of the Olympics. There are simply too many moving parts and too many people, and this is a city of millions of people and an extremely diverse population. It's a security nightmare in many ways. The question is, like, if you're going to host the Olympics, you know, this is what you're dealing with. Where are you not dealing with it unless you have it in a very remote city in very lockdown conditions? And in fact, almost no cities are bidding for the Olympics these days.
I was just going to say, unless you don't have it.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, for the one after, it was Paris
Vivian,
and LA.
Are you sitting next to a Parisienne who doesn't want the Olympics?
And pay more for my metro ticket? It's going to be just a nightmare.
Oh, dear. The Olympics are in Paris. The scandal of the week, though, is 11 time zones away. Dateline, the village of Chopu, that's on the French Polynesian island of Tahiti, host of the surfing competition at next summer's games. But the vintage wooden judging tower, beloved by surfers the world over, had to go, insisted the International Olympic Committee, not up to standards. And when it came time to break ground on a new metal tower for judges and journalists, it happened just as, there you see the old tower, just as environmentalists had predicted, the wrecking of the bay's delicate coral reef.
This test went badly. If we can't find a solution, we'll have to face the possibility of a change in venue.
That was the president of the French Polynesia region, Nico Hines. Surfing in Tahiti seemed like an intriguing idea when it was announced.
Well, I tell you, I'll volunteer to go and cover this one if you're looking for anybody. I think, look, I think this is just absolute classic IOC arrogance. You know, this place that they've chosen is somewhere that's hosted dozens of world surfing championships. They have surfing competitions there all the time. They've got this system that they use where they put up a wooden viewing platform. It's worked for decades. Why on earth would the IOC have to say, we know better, we have to do it this way, this is the official way to do it? You know, they just have no sympathy and no empathy for local customs, and it's just the IOC all over. And it's a real shame. Hopefully they can come to some sort of compromise where they use you know, a platform like they have for the surfers that are there all the time. It's really caused a big uproar among the surfing community, who take this spot very, very seriously. You know, Kelly Slater, the kind of surfing icon, has been outspoken saying that they shouldn't put in this metal platform, and something like 180,000 surfing fans have signed a petition to try and stop them from doing it. And I'm sure they'll come up with some sort of compromise in the end, and I bet the pictures will be absolutely fantastic, even if it is 15,000 kilometres away from Paris, which is supposedly hosting this Olympics.
By the way, the Olympics are into their second Tahitigate in as many months. The Financial Prosecutor's Office has opened a probe into Paris Mayor Anne Hidalgo's €60,000 inspection tour. Yes, you volunteered, Nico Hines, but she actually made the trip. This is a trip that was paid for by Lila Jacinto and other residents of the city of Paris. Marie Gégaud, your thoughts on
Anne Hidalgo's trip
to Tahiti and
yeah, of course, it's terrible. Of course, it's a terrible image. She should be exemplary, and she's not. And but it's the same if we look at the COP28. They are all meeting to reduce the carbon emission, and then you see that they all come with 3-4 planes and the cars, the luxury watch, and the
You sound resigned about this. Like, well, French politicians, nothing more you can do about them.
Oh, I think maybe people will judge. Apparently, people in Paris are not happy with what she's doing, so maybe she will not stay.
She went there because her daughter. She went for the inspection tour, but she stayed on Vivian Wald's because to spend a bit of vacation time. Her daughter's working there right now,
which makes it even worse. I mean, she's sort of mixing business with family. The taxpayers are paying for her to go and sort of see her family across the world and in high style in a place which is kind of nice to go to in the middle of winter. So the whole thing looked bad. On the other hand, I agree with Marie that this is so classically the way things happen with these giant global events. Same with the World Cup, if you recall. The dissatisfaction of Macron jetting back and forth to see Les Bleus play at the World Cup in Doha. And the Argentine president came out and said, I'm going to stay at home and watch the final with my people. And he was hailed for that. And this is the same kind of thing. It's sort of, the enormous sums of money that are sort of slushing through these international organizations, whether it be FIFA or the IOC. And it's distasteful to regular people.
I agree with you.
Distasteful to regular people. And you're both talking about the problems that the planet is facing as that COP28 summit takes place in Dubai. As far back as 1988, Time magazine put saving the environment on the cover for its Person of the Year, or in this case, Planet of the Year. That was back when Pluto, by the way, was still a planet. So I'm glad that Earth won and not what is now a non-planet. For 2023, it's Taylor Swift succeeding last year's choice of Volodymyr Zelensky, the U.S. pop star whose Eras tour is currently breaking box office records. Vivian Wald, why Taylor Swift?
Well, let's just say she's going to sell more magazines than the cover that has
that much we
planet
know,
on.
right?
That's first and foremost. But maybe not foremost. I don't want to, belittle the choice. I actually think it's kind of an inspired choice. She's the first artist to make it to be the Person of the Year. And Time's done it for like 85 years, I believe. So
wait a minute. So Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, Bob Dylan, Madonna.
No, and it's not like Taylor Swift is bigger than Elvis or the Beatles, although she certainly is economically. But the fact is that we're living in a sort of viral social media era in which she has taken the world by storm. She has made $1 billion off her concerts so far. She's got another year of these concerts to go. It's estimated she'll make about $3 billion.
But if you're putting her on the cover of Time, it's because she's about more than music.
She's about more than music. She's about a kind of self-made, mega successful brand that appears to have the power. I'm no Swiftie myself, but she appears to have the power of unity on a very mass scale, which apparently no one else does right now. I guess that was the thinking.
Or maybe Time magazine just needs to sell its magazine to younger people.
Nico Hines, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a bit sceptical about this. I think it's a bit grotesque because I think really the only thing you can say about Taylor Swift, as opposed to, say, Michael Jackson or Madonna or previous kind of global icons, is that, yes, she's been the most successful money-making kind of machine. But I'm not sure that that's something that we should be particularly aspiring to.
But
and I think it's a shame
her songs,
that, yes,
in her songs, she's about empowerment, standing up for yourself. She's talks about, in very raw manner, about her breakups. She resonates.
She does. I think the songs themselves don't have anywhere near the same kind of level of musical legacy as some of those other icons we've just been talking about. You know, I think if you went to the average person in the street and asked them to list 10 of her biggest songs, that the people would be struggling. However, I do think she's, a very impressive character. And I think there's a clip that went around that was about her deciding to kind of make her first forays into politics in 2018. It was the midterms after Trump had been elected, and her father was begging her not to say anything. And she was actually breaking down in tears, saying this was the most important thing. She had to be true to herself. She had to come out and say what she really thought. And I think that sort of thing is very inspiring. But, 5 years after that, what impact, what campaign, what causes is she using her massive influence to change the world with? I think it's a somewhat hollow, money-making salute, and it feels a little bit tawdry to me.
Tawdry, or maybe the other shoe is yet to drop. But we've seen fans of the Korean pop group BTS have sometimes weighed in on politics. Could the Swifties be a factor in 2024?
I don't know, but I find it extremely positive because, the other candidates were Vladimir Putin on the list. I don't know, Viviane, maybe it's not...
Yeah, I guess it's sort of like I can tell you the kind of company line, and it is true in a sense that, this is not a kind of hero pick. Stalin was...
It's not hero of the year.
Person of the year. Yeah,
Right.
it is not hero of the year. They have those as well, I believe. But this is not it. It's just the most news-making person. Putin was person of the year at one point.
In 2007, I remember. But I've been told that Xi Jinping was on the list too, so I'm very glad that it was Taylor Swift and not... it's inspiring for young people, and she's so beautiful, and I think it's a positive move in the terrible world
but
in which we live. But it is
true, I think, also what Nico says, that, and so what? She has all this massive global power and giant amounts of money. What's she doing with it at this terrible moment in history? And I can't say I can answer that, even having read the whole cover story this week.
Well, let's all hail this rich, beautiful, blonde woman who is the most spectacular thing to come out of the whole year.
What, you're saying should have been someone like Beyonce instead? Because Beyonce's also got that same sort of message, but from a different musical roots that Taylor Swift has.
And how has she pushed what has happened in 2023 any further? She's just made more money. The fact that she had to.
You have clearly not seen Swifties going to a concert.
And I dare say I will survive.
We'll leave it there. I want to thank you, Lila Jacinto. I want to thank Vivian Walt. Marie Gégaud, I want to thank as well Nico Hines for being with us from London. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.